Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1752. The topic is Q&A, and the title is, Will Steroids Help Me Grow Faster? So we had a listener send in a question. It was the first time they'd ever reached out. They said they'd been listening for a while. They said a bunch of nice things, which was really nice. And then part of what they said I want to read through is they said, I've been considering taking steroids. I train 6 days a week, but I feel like I don't look as big as I should. I'm wondering if I were to take steroids with what I'm doing now, would they help me get bigger? And then he went on and kind of explained his training, explained his nutrition, and his overall kind of approach. And I want to kind of share a generalized version of how I answered his question, because I think this would help everybody. Is when you take like steroids, steroids is a huge term, by the way. Like there's a lot of things that would be under the umbrella of that term. And there are strength-based steroids, there are muscle-building steroids, there are like fat loss-based steroids. There's actually, ways to improve endurance, aerobic endurance through, supplementation. There's a lot of things that fall under that category. But if we're looking at it for growth, let's say that they want to take the steroids that are related to growth. Steroids for growth, they speed up and they better maximize the potential for muscle creation, which, fancier term is protein synthesis. So the creation of proteins that your body would then use to, turn into muscle tissue. So the idea is that when you take steroids, that you can recover faster and grow faster if and that's the thing, is the if, because I'm about to give you a nice long list here. But it does not automatically really do much. If you were to change nothing about your training, change nothing about your nutrition, and then take steroids, you're likely going to see some level of improvement, but it's going to be very, very, very small, because there could be very large gaps. Large holes in what people are doing that would actually be a limiter to the effectiveness of the steroids. So the steroids make the potential for growth bigger, but they don't actually really do anything. Like, you have to have the stuff that it's done with, if that makes sense. So I can have a budget to build a house. Say I want to build a $300,000 house or a $1 million house. Those are quite different houses. So $300,000 house versus a $1 million house. But I have to have materials, I have to have workers, I have to start the process, I have to, just because I have the money in the bank doesn't mean I have anything, right? So just because you put steroids in your body doesn't mean you have anything. You still have to go through the process to get the thing. So I might have more money in the bank to build a house, but I still have to go through the process of building the house if I want to get a bigger house. It's kind of like that. Is the steroids increase the potential for growth, but you still have to do all of the things that lead to growth. Now, looking through kind of a nice basic list, and this filled in some of the gaps that this listener had. They were under-eating, they were inconsistent with their calories, and they were under-eating their protein for how active they were. And that was actually causing, overwhelmingly, the biggest limiter to their growth was they were inconsistent with calories. They had way too much sugar some days. Some days they just didn't have enough food at all. They would skip meals. Their protein, this person's around 185 pounds, and they said they're pretty lean. But some days their protein was 140. Some days it was 250. It was kind of all over the place. So there was just inconsistency. And that was going to be the limiter of them growing, more so than whether they had steroids or not in their system. That is going to make a difference if those nutritional issues persist. So calories. You need to have calories. You need to have sufficient calories for growth. Our body, the process of converting what we eat to muscle tissue requires energy. And that comes from calories, most notably carbohydrates and fats. Those are going to be kind of your energy nutrients. And then protein is kind of the material that you build stuff with. So carbs and fats give you the energy to build things. Protein gives you the thing to build it with. That kind of thing. So We have to have proper amount of calories. Now, if somebody's on steroids versus not on steroids, they could probably tolerate a higher calorie intake and maintain the same level of leanness. So if you're on steroids, you can afford to eat more and maintain a certain level of leanness than if you weren't on steroids. So because you take the steroids, you don't get anything for it, but you do have the potential to eat more to get something from it. So even though if you take the steroids or not, it doesn't matter. If you take the steroids, you don't get anything from them until you eat more. So you have to eat proper calories. Now, obviously, there's too much more, and then you're just getting a bunch of body fat. But the caloric demand is higher when you're on steroids. So you do need to have more consistent. And compared to you not on steroids, you have to have more calories. Protein, absolutely, 100%. So since steroids help with the process of converting dietary protein to muscle tissue, the more protein you have available within your bloodstream consistently throughout the day, the more muscle tissue you're going to get. So not only do you have to eat more protein, but you have to make sure it's available throughout the day pretty much at all times. You always want the body to have some protein floating around in the bloodstream, so that way it always has material to be building muscle tissue with. So there's an increase in the amount of protein that somebody can typically have when they're on steroids because you're going to have a higher usage, like a higher amount of usage. So professional bodybuilders who would be on steroids, they're going to be, and it's a big range, but just to give you an idea, is somewhere between 1 gram to 3 grams per pound of body weight. So if they weigh 200 pounds, they're eating between 200 to 600 grams of protein a day. And 1 gram would be very low case. 3 gram is a high case. So somebody's, like most pros are probably going to be somewhere in that middle range, like 1.5 to 2.5, somewhere in there. So if you weigh 185 and you started taking steroids, you would want to be consuming roughly, probably at least 300 grams of protein, if not more than that. So 185 times 1.5 is 277. So that would be like kind of the bottom of the normal range for people who take steroids, like bodybuilders and stuff. That would be kind of the bottom of their normal range of protein, would be 277 grams at 185 pounds of body weight. If you want to be where most pros are, which is around that probably 2 times body weight, that's 370 grams. So you can hear how that's a crap load of protein, and if this person's just dancing around between 150 and 250, they're certainly not eating enough. Now, even if they were to take steroids, it's not going to really do much. They're going to be missing out on pretty much all the damn benefit of taking the drug. So they're going to be spending the money, taking whatever health risk there is, and they're not even going to be maximizing that. So typically when I help clients, like I've helped people get IFBB Pro cards, and I've helped people with non-tested strength-based competitions and aesthetic competitions, is you have to get your food right before you would consider any drugs. If your food isn't right, taking the drug isn't going to make a damn bit of difference. It's just going to empty out your wallet. You have to have your calories in place. You have to have your protein in place. Those things have to be consistent. We then would actually start monitoring, sugar intake, make sure the timing of all this stuff is consistent so that way it's in your bloodstream throughout the day. There's a lot of things that you got to do before you would take drugs, because without those things in place, the drugs are completely worthless. Like, you're not even getting the benefit from them, but you're going to get all the negative impact, like health impact, negative cost impact. So calories and protein absolutely need to be addressed, be ultra consistent. They need to be a normal way of life before you would even think about taking drugs. Hydration needs to be consistent. Hydration, like fluid, helps with everything. It helps not only with the muscle building process, but it helps with digestion. If you're properly hydrated, you digest more of the food you eat, like a better quality of the food that you eat. So it's extremely important to make sure that you have all of these elements in place, so that way you are getting the benefit of the drug if you're going to take the drug. Sleep. Sleep has to be consistent. When you sleep, basically it's non-competing time for the body to recover and grow. What that means is your body's not also micromanaging your daily activity, stress, all these other components. The body is getting time to minimize what would be competing for its focus and attention that it should be giving to muscle building. It's spreading that out. So when you sleep, it's that non-competition time where the body can actually focus on growing muscle tissue and repairing the nervous system, which is part of the process as well. Then we want to look at training. You'd have to make sure you have the proper stimulus in your training. If a person's on drugs, you want to maximize the amount of damage, appropriate type of damage that you create within your workouts, so that way you maximize growth potential. So training has to be more precise, just like nutrition has to be more precise, like hydration, like sleep. Then you look at supplements. You should be definitely taking a digestive quality supplement. You should be taking some kind of inflammation management supplement, which is like a joint supplement. And you should take a supplement to fill in nutritional gaps. Might be like a greens type supplement, a probiotics type supplement, which kind of falls under the digestive quality, but sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of supplements you would want to use to make sure you're maximizing your digestion as well. So, if you're on steroids, you would have a greater potential for growth. But you will not just automatically get more growth. You might get like newbie gains, as they're called. Somebody might have, if you're brand new to them, you're going to get some improvement out of what you're currently doing. But it's going to be ridiculously small, like 10% of what that drug would actually be capable of if you don't have all these other things in place and accounted for and being done consistently. So, what I would encourage a person to do is to maximize these areas consistently, naturally, before you would consider taking drugs. You want your calories to be appropriate and consistent every day. Your protein to be appropriate and consistent every day. Hydration, sleep, appropriate and consistent every day. Make sure your training is consistent. Make sure it fits the normal parameters of training for growth. So we do actually have a podcast where I talk about what programming should look like if you are programming for muscle growth. That's podcast 1437, training podcast titled Programming for Greatest Muscle Growth. You can find that podcast on the podcast player on our website. But we want to maximize what we're doing already. Make sure we're doing it to the nth degree. And then if you were to take drugs, you would eat a little bit more, you'd add a little more protein, add more sleep if you can, make sure you maybe add a couple more supplements, supportive supplements, but you would be building upon a base that was already there. Don't take the steroids and then try to build your base. Build the damn base, get everything right, maximize what your body can do first, right? That's by far the best approach, because drugs only give you a greater potential for growth if all of these elements are in place first. Okay. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully it gave you some context and some awareness. If you have any follow-up questions, just shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. And if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.